Hello, I'm John Coleman from ApocatastasisInstitute, an institute for the humanities and alternative college and high school here on New Milford, Connecticut, USA. The purpose of this broadcast is to get in, believe it or not, milestone of a sort, episode 250, 250, a nice round number, 250 of A Conversation With. It must now be 6 or 7 years since this series began at about this very time in August of, well, that would have been 2018, and it's 20 and 25 now. So that I believe is 7 years. I'm a humanist, not a mathematician, but I think that's about 7 years. Here we are, 250 episodes in, and we have Chastity White Rose joining us to talk about creative writing and chess and ongoing projects and all sorts of great things. Before we introduce our guest today, one announcement, and I suppose appropriate for our focus on creative writing, right? This episode is entitled "The Vow of Chastity," creative writing. And before we get on with that, just one plug, as you are always going to get from me per recording, and that is appropriate indeed. Our poetry cursus, our collection, our month-long cycle of poetry, provisionally has been finished. So for the next year, we're going to be going with this cycle. This forms the heart of our project, which is our 2-year undergraduate course of humanities, teaching history, literature, philosophy, and art in sync over 2 years, but every month reviewing these pinnacle pieces of poetry till they enter our bloodstream, so to speak. So you can check that out. You can download it freely, and we have many ways you can participate in this, some by enrolling in our courses, either full-time or monthly, and then even just to download the text and follow along on our, at this point, weekly presentations on where we're at. So all of that's waiting for you in our project page, also on our main page. With all of that out of the way, Chastity White Rose, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Thank you very much. I know you have just finished your third shift, the infamous overnight shift. I've done that myself. And so thank you for putting off your sleep for a little bit to talk about these worthy topics.
I'm so glad that I got your invite when I was checking all the settings in my WordPress because I didn't get an email. Instead, I was trying to explore. I was actually looking for what are the search engine optimization, settings in WordPress. And so I was digging deep into the dashboard, and then I saw like this, that people had actually entered things on the forum, and I'm like, I got an invite from this John Coleman back in January of this year. And so so now I'm 7 months late responding, but I'm so glad I saw it because I'm like, oh, somebody wants me to be on their show. I mean, why not?
That's great. Yes, it's been long in coming, and I always have to temper the possibility of spam files or something even more archaic like the setup of WordPress, of which I'm well familiar, or Facebook or whatever, because some of these I'm the sort to say, that son of a gun, to hell with him. He never got back to me. I sent him an email. I sent her an email, and I have to remember that that things really do get lost in the post, so to speak. So anyway, it's worked out. It's very fortuitous that it's worked out here. Would you tell us a bit about yourself, and we'll go from there, Chastity?
Yes, one of the things that's unique about me is that I grew up being raised by my single mother who homeschooled me since the age of 9 when we moved to Lee's-Hunt, Missouri. Because in Missouri, the laws were a little bit easier to deal with. So I grew up with just me and my mom. I have a father. I have 2 older siblings, but my parents divorced when I was very young, and my father was not in my life. And because I was homeschooled and because I'm very autistic, I was always the kind of person who was lost in my own world and my own thoughts. and thought differently than most people do. Because when I hear people talk and the things they say, I wonder if they've thought very deeply about things. And I feel like I've had a chance to grow. I've had a chance to become an individual person without perhaps being brainwashed too much into a particular worldview. And I think I've learned to question about everything. I've learned to question everything about religion, politics, philosophy. I question, even the rules of chess, for example. Like in this idea that there's a checkmate, but the king's never captured. I mean, why? It's like seems unsatisfying. But yeah, so I was homeschooled. I grew up with a mother who was a music teacher, teaching piano and violin lessons. So I was always around music, and I played video games and stuff. But I was always very skilled at playing games, and I was doing computer programming when I was 14 years old, and nobody cared about the stuff that I did. But I started programming with integer sequences, generating the prime numbers, the Fibonacci sequence, the powers of two, or whatever I could do. I basically had a math gift. I had a math gift where I figured out on my own how to hex edit save files of games on the computer and cheat at video games. Because when I opened up a hex editor, I'm like, wait a minute, oh, where's these numbers? So I was reading about hexadecimal and binary, and so I learned about all these numeral systems. I started learning how computers work at such an internal level, and you could say the computer became my best friend, because with the computer, when you write a programming language, you are communicating with the machine, but getting an objective response. Because when you communicate with humans with English, one person may take something that you say in a positive way, another person has a different mindset and takes it differently. Whereas computers are standardized in such a way that you do the same thing, you get the same result generally. And I found that reliability and stability to bring me comfort. Yeah, I've always wanted to branch out. I've always tried to make friends, and it hasn't always worked out that well because I'm very different. And I guess that's why I have sort of embarked on a sort of a spiritual journey that's different than most people, because I was raised, Christian. I taught the Bible. That was part of being homeschooled. I've been in various churches, but I guess I really resonated with this idea that I could be more. I guess I could be live more for God without the attachments that so many people have. Because when the more family and friends people have, the more peer pressure there is for them to be a certain way. And for so long in my life, the only person in my life was my mother. The only person whose opinion mattered of me was my mother. And so I had a great deal of freedom in thinking the thoughts that I wanted to think. And so I guess this private world is common with autistic people, and yet I have become better at communicating to the world over time. I've spent time working in grocery stores. I had 10 years of experience working for Hy-Vee. Now I work at Walmart. I even worked at the National Records Center for a government contractor named Brilliant at one point, which was a very physical job that destroyed my knee, but that's a whole story right there. But so while my employment has been very humble, I've never been rich, never really had a very good paying job, at least not for very long. I've had all these talents, and I was in my 30s. I was in my 30s, and here I had been working on a Tetris game for a couple of years. I made my own Tetris game and published it to Steam, and nobody cared about it. But I played it. I played it for hours because I created Tetris with no gravity. Basically, if Tetris has no
Oh,
gravity
to
and
to
the blocks,
interject
what?
to interject, I published it on Steam and nobody cared about it. Publishing and having the herd pass on by is the whole cruel fate of authors and creatives and so forth. So don't let it get you down.
Yeah, I'm a struggling artist because that's what happens. What we have here, and I know why it is. We have a supply and demand problem because we live in a world where there are billions of people, but there are even more books and video games and movies to choose from. We are so flooded with entertainment and education from so many sources, so I can sort of see the perspective of people who would be like, well, why would I read Chastity's books when there's Harry Potter and Twilight and the Bible and the Last Unicorn or the Chronicles of Narnia? I'm just mentioning some classics here, some ones that I know something about anyway. But there are some books and some movies that become massively popular while others don't. And what I'd like to do is I like to analyze, Disney movies, for example. Why is a Disney movie so popular? For example, for many years, for most of my time growing up, my favorite Disney movie of all time was Beauty and the Beast. I loved Beauty and the Beast because this concept that your true beauty is on the inside and who you are can be seen even if you do have the body of a beast. And you can sort of see how a transgender person might relate to that sort of a message. But then that movie was topped when Frozen came out. Disney's Frozen with Queen Elsa of Arendelle and her sister Anna. That My mom and I have watched that countless times. Every Christmas we would watch that movie, and I've seen the sequel as well. I distilled what I believe is the element that makes Frozen unique among all the Disney movies with Disney princesses. It is the fact that well, technically both the princesses, they don't really end up in the traditional, like, oh well, some prince comes along and kisses the princess and they get married and live happily ever after. Frozen is not Cinderella. First of all, the guy that Anna thought she was in love with, he ended up being the villain. And then Queen Elsa, the greatest love that could thaw a frozen heart was her love for her sister. It was not romantic or sexual love. And I'm like, oh my God, I am Queen Elsa. Like, that's what I realized, is because I have great love, but it's just not of the traditional romantic sexual kind. And that kind of character I can identify with. And I that's definitely inspired my writing. All the books I've read, all the movies I've watched has inspired, of course, my own writing, my own creative writing. It's inspired me in some creative ways.
And I just want to interject here for the audience's sake that you can see in the bubble, I'm toggling between our proper title and this link tree. So down in the description, in addition to Chastity's blogs and odds and ends websites, chess, we can talk about chess soon enough, is the link tree. And you can access Chastity's Amazon page to see the different books on offer. Please go on, Chastity.
Yes, and about the link tree, it links to my Amazon page. It also links to my books to read page, which actually lists all the ebooks I've published, which are also on other platforms besides Amazon. Because I also publish through Draft to Digital, because ebooks are actually becoming a very popular thing. And there's the pros and cons of ebooks versus paperbacks or hardbacks, because the paperback was the original book, the physical book with paper and ink that you hold in your hand and you take somewhere and you just read, whereas ebooks have provided people a certain thing. I feel like the people who read ebooks and people who read paperback books are generally different people, but sometimes some people enjoy both. And I think the thing about ebooks that's nice is there are readaholics. We're talking people who really like to read. People, they want to read something and they want to read it now. The idea that you can buy an ebook or you can find many of them for free on various websites, including even a few of mine that you can just get free on Smashwords, is a very, if you're someone who can't stop reading and you're impatient, you want to read something new and you want it now, ebooks are totally your thing. And there's also the technological component of it, in that your ebook reader, whether that's a Kindle, a Nook, your cell phone, or your computer with some kind of software, it keeps track of where you were in the book. It automatically keeps track for you. And also, if you buy an ebook, then if the author adds to it, fixes typos, adds content to it, then you get an automatic update. Like you can get an update. So when the author added another chapter or fixed something, whatever, then you get that update. So in a sense, ebooks are the new version of books in that you can receive updates, kind of like video games. It used to be video games. You would buy something, it was like on an NES or Super NES or Game Boy cartridge, or it was like a CD-ROM or a floppy disk. Yes, I'm old enough to know what floppy disks are. I witnessed different kinds. I'm a nerd. And so you had it on a disc, you had it on, but you bought a game, you had it, and the game never changed. So if there were glitches or bugs in the game, it just remained the same. But that's not the case, because what in the 21st century, when Minecraft came out, Minecraft was a weird game because the idea is it was released at a very early alpha stage. It had all the elements that make Minecraft great, with that infinite creativity of placing blocks and building a three-dimensional world. But then every time that the author updated it, like, well, here's some new monsters, or here's some new animals. Oh, here's some new things you can grow in your farms. Here's a new block that does this. So it was a constant stream of updates. And the idea that games can be updated, you can buy a game or just download a game for free on Steam, and you can actually receive updates. A lot of people like that because it gives them new content, because some people get bored of playing the same game. Obviously, I don't, because I keep playing chess, even though the rules have stayed the same for about 500 years of chess in its modern form. It's at the true history of chess is about 3,000 years old, though. So
In fact, one of the reasons I decided to contact you after I learned about your work so much earlier in this year is, besides the and in our setup also for this meeting, besides hearing that you work third shift, which I've done in my time in retail, no less. I've horrible memories of shelf stocking at. Speaking of memory lane, Toys R Us over Christmas years ago.
wow.
That'll roughen you up, that sort of thing. But anyway, and the characters you meet, you talk about character, the characters you meet in those overnight jobs are something else too. But something else that also piqued my interest to contact you, just on a lighter note, is I see on your YouTube, which the audience will check out, the chess website. I see that there's a certain chess website online that you've thumbnailed. And I remember when I was working in the factory, I would come home not third shift, in the middle of the day for lunch, and I would play that particular online chess game. So I'm having a few memory lanes there myself. So go on now.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because, see, with chess, chess is one of those bizarre games. It's not quite like any other game in the world because it's the only board game that has become like a really large international sport. Even though there's a lot of games, and of course there's tournaments and events for certain board games, video games, card games. Poker is probably the world's number one played card game. But chess now in this modern time of the 21st century, now chess is actually a video game because now you can play chess both against humans. You can play against strangers or friends online. You can also play against the artificial intelligence, the chess engine that can make moves if you don't have a human to play with. And so now that a board game has turned into a video game, it leads us to new possibilities never before seen. And I started playing chess when I was 9 years old because I had a friend named Patrick, and he taught me how to play chess one day. He was like a big brother to me, not related, but he was kind of like a big brother. He was a man I met at a church in Lenexa many years ago. And he got a chess set and he taught me how to play chess. By the third game, I already beat him because after he taught me the rules, my autistic brain of calculating geometry, I just started being able to think, well, wait, if I do that, then that happens. And I started planning like, oh, well, 5 moves ahead, I'm going to win. And so I had a natural talent for it right then. But so I played chess for many, many years, and I played against old guys at the Gamber Center. There's this place called the Gamber Center, and those guys have all passed. They were in their like 80s, 90s at the time, but they were old men, and they were also Army veterans. These two men that I played with the most, they were Army veterans, so they always had their stories to tell. So these old men, they love to tell their stories of their long lives while we played chess, and I just loved it. I looked forward to going and playing chess with old men and hearing them tell their stories about the military and their life with their family and the way things used to be 70 years ago and stuff. I just ate it up, and so they were like some of my best friends, and so I was sad when they died, which was inevitable. And then for a while, I didn't even play chess. I guess because the people I played with the most, I liked that one-on-one human interaction the most. And I guess I kind of forgot about chess for a while after that. But then I got back into it about 2 years ago, actually, back in 2023. I got an email from chess.com. And I forgot, and I had even forgotten I even had an account, but apparently someone sent me a message or something, and I'm like, oh, okay, let's see if I can log in, see if I remember my password, and somehow I did. So I started playing on chess.com, but then later on, a friend invited me to play on Lichess, and lichess.org is actually a very interesting concept because like chess.com, it of course allows you to play online chess. It has many of the same features, but the difference between Lichess and chess.com is really more the philosophy, because chess.com is a business. It's a business run by people who, they make money by people with paid subscriptions, and then you get access to all this content that's paywalled, so they try to get people to subscribe and get these courses and all this good stuff. Whereas Lichess is completely free and open source. It's run on donations. It's run on donations as a nonprofit organization, and its software is free and open source. And I think the reason that I fell in love with that site, the reason I played chess on there, is because they have all these amazing community blogs. They have these amazing blogs. They're very supportive people. They care about people's freedom. And it even has a section on the website explaining why there's no ads. And it explains that the advertising built into most websites, okay, first of all, it takes up your bandwidth. It causes more electricity to be consumed for millions of people visiting a website. It's loading these advertisements and pop-up images and videos that start playing whether you want them to or not. And so it's using tremendous amount of electricity, and it also is invading your privacy. So this idea that they're spying on you, there's an algorithm, it finds out what you've been looking at, and then it tries to target advertising towards you. For example, this is the funniest story. I was trying to learn the rules of poker, the card game, because I had never played poker. I didn't know anything about it. So I kept Googling poker and trying to find things out. And then what started happening? So then I would get on Instagram, and there would be all these teenage girls lip syncing along to Poker Face by Lady Gaga. And I'm like, okay, because I've been searching the word poker, trying to find the rules of poker. Now I'm getting Lady Gaga recommended to me. Now, no, but however, Lady Gaga is really awesome. I gotta love Lady Gaga. She's awesome. But that just shows you how the algorithm, it looks at everything that you're searching. It looks at everything you view, and it keeps recommending more of that thing. And Lichess is actually against this idea of invading your privacy, of these tracker cookies that are tracking you, where you visit, all that.
Chastity, what is the that website? Is it Elite Chess? What is that? Can you say
It,
that
it's
slowly?
it's 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 lichess.org. In fact, yeah, I'll just type in the chat lichess.org.
And I will put this in the description in the final edit. Thank you for that, Chastity. Go on.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. What the name means is it's Libre chess. Libre, like I believe, is the French word for freedom. And interestingly, the French have a huge influence on the world of chess. The name for the rule, en passant, for example, where a pawn moves two squares and then the other pawn captures it in passing as if it had only moved one. En passant is a French term for in passing. And the British and the French influence on chess, there's a lot of history there.
A good historian that I try to be, I should also point out to the audience, and perhaps Chastity doesn't know this, there are variations on the game of chess, including most deliciously a French Revolution chess, which is only the nobles on one side and the pawns on the other. So it's a variation of chess, and the pawns can actually go behind, they can go off the board in a sense. So all the rules, get it, the French Revolution, all the rules are up in the air. So
Oh
um,
wow.
you can look
Yeah,
that up.
and now I played my share of chess variants. In fact, another thing about Lead Chess that it has over chess.com is it has like about 8 variants, including standard chess. It has Crazy House, it has Atomic, it has Three Check, it has Horde, and it has Racing Kings. Racing Kings is weird because the kings have to race to get to the other side of the board, you know. But these variants, like Crazy House, for example, you capture your opponent's pieces, and then they turn to your color, and they're in reserve, and then you can drop them back on the board. So you get to take your opponent's pieces and then use those pieces against them. So as you can guess, Crazy House, they call it Crazy House because literally you don't know what's going to happen. Because on any empty square, if somebody has a reserved piece, they can just drop a knight there and fork your king and queen, and it's deadly. Like, you have to be a good chess player before you're ready for Crazy House.
Excellent. I will remember that. Thank you. So I gave you French Revolution chess, and I'll check out Crazy House chess. Thank you for that. Some
Yeah.
education questions here, both as a youth and an adult here, Chastity. So the first question is, with homeschool, do you think that that served you well? And our childhood so far beyond both of us and a good lot of the audience, have you seen the homeschool world develop, or is it different or the same sorts of people attracted to it? And then the second question I'll save until after your reply.
Okay. Yeah. Well, first of all, I think that the kinds of parents who homeschool their children, they are people who care about their children's education. Because when you are in a public school setting or even a private school, you are in a classroom. If you're a child in a classroom full of 30 to 40 other students, you're not going to get your questions answered. You're not going to get one-on-one instruction, because they'll have one or two teachers trying to teach a subject to 40 students at once. And when I was in elementary school at Lindbergh Elementary in Kansas City, Kansas, they didn't teach me how to read. They didn't teach me how to read. So I didn't know how to read. I was 6 years old. And so my mom was teaching me at home how to read, because this school, they didn't teach phonics. They just try to get you to memorize words. Like, they didn't really have instructions like, if you see a new word, how do you pronounce it? But then my mom, was teaching me at home. And then she had these videos from the library that she got, like Fran Allison teaches phonics, and there was a puppet named Alfred. Man, that was a weird show, but basically, teaching you all the letters and the sounds they make and teaching you words as you go. So there was me at 6, 7 years old, learning to read and pronounce words for the first time, because I could speak, because I had picked it up naturally as people pick up their native language, but to actually be able to read words, know what they mean, and to be able to spell them out and pronounce them, well, that's essential. I couldn't have become a writer if I hadn't had my mother to homeschool me and get me materials like that, because public school wasn't doing it. And there's a lot of people who are illiterate, like, because they go all the way through public high school, but they don't really read much, because it's more like they're listening to the lectures that their teachers are giving them. So those who have a good audio memory and can remember what's been told to them, well, then they can answer questions on the test. But people don't really read as much as they used to, because teachers lecture them, and now they have, there's movies and TV to watch. So people are watching things and listening to things. They're not reading as much as they used to. And I feel like that's actually it's a detriment to society that people are not reading. Because when you listen to a person teach something, you're always going to get that person's bias in it. You're always going to get that person's bias in it. For example, when my mom listens to, her Bible teachers that she likes to listen to on YouTube, well, then, they're going to interpret their Bible verse their way, and they're going to try to apply it to a political issue and try to turn it political and stuff like that. But what they're saying is probably not the same as what it meant thousands of years ago when it was first written in Hebrew or Greek. We don't know what exactly a lot of those things meant without understanding the historical context. And so my mom's a scholar. My mom reads a lot. She writes a lot too, So my mom and I are both authors who have published books. And I got started when we were publishing her book, From Horror to Hope, because she didn't know anything about computers. She's still basically computer illiterate, but we got her on YouTube and email. She can do that much. But so I was, the computer nerd who had grown up, mostly in the 80s and 90s, knowing how to use technology. So she would write things on paper, and I had to type it all up on the computer. And then we had to find ways to get it published. And back then we didn't really have like Amazon or know about. I don't think Kindle Direct Publishing existed back then. Eventually, we went with CreateSpace, which later was like discontinued and in favor of Kindle Direct Publishing. But were contacting, self-publishing companies and all sorts of stuff. And there's a lot of scams out there. But my mom had a story to tell, her autobiography, and so I was the one who got it typed up. I got it formatted. I was using like Open Office on Ubuntu Linux, like on a computer with 256 megabytes of RAM. Only 256 megabytes of RAM. I was running Ubuntu 5.1.0, and this was like, was this the late 90s, early 2000s? Old technology by today's standards. I had the floppy disks. I didn't have the CD burner on that. But I had a lot of 3.5 inch floppy disks.
Oh, that's great there with Ubuntu. I've had my own run-ins with Ubuntu and have been relatively pleased with Open Office and so forth. Certainly the price is right, and the philosophy behind it is even more intriguing.
Yeah,
Now,
I nerd out on the Free Software Foundation. Like I was reading the new general public license version 3, and I'm learning about, licensing software, because there's different software licenses, and they have different rules, like where some will allow you to include that software in your closed source proprietary stuff. Like an MIT license is going to pretty much allow you to do just about anything you want, whereas the GPL and the LGPL, they tend to require that you have to make sure people have access to the source code. The idea of open source is that people learn to share. You don't just hoard like a good idea and then not let other people use that. And I think the most interesting and the biggest thing about free and open source software is it's free as in Libre. That there's that word again, Libre. It's not necessarily free as in price, because you are allowed to actually sell your software, but you still have to make sure that people are able to access the source code to where they can modify it according to their needs. So there's like a basic trust system. It's sort of like with now Smashwords, which I started publishing ebooks on, was later bought by Drafted Digital, but they still kept the basic same model where when you publish something on Drafted Digital and it goes on Smashwords, which is one of the main sites, those books don't have any digital rights management. And for the audience who doesn't know what digital rights management is, it's a sort of vendor lock-in. So like if you buy a Kindle book, on Amazon or whatever, it'll be readable on your Kindle device, but you can't take it to a third party reader app. So it won't work on like Google Play or Apple Books or Calibre, which Calibre is an open source ebook reading software, which is really cool. So what I've done is now I've become more conscious, realizing that if I'm going to buy a book or if I'm going to publish a book, I want to make sure it's available, so that if people they buy a book and they want to read it on multiple different devices, they have the freedom to transfer. And technically, once somebody has that file, that PDF or that EPUB file that they're using, yes, they can break your copyright law. Yes, they can just send it to everyone in the world for free, and then you don't get any money from it. That is the danger of it. But it's a trust system. It's a trust system with open source software and with ebooks. There's a certain amount of trust that people have with each other, and that good people do not violate other people's rights. They don't violate their intellectual property and buy something and then just give it away for free, because Like, I'm that kind of person who years ago, I used to download the ROMs of, various video games, Super NES, Game Boy, NES, the games from my childhood, because I didn't have a way to access those games anymore. I didn't have the system anymore, and I wanted to play me some Tetris. I wanted to play some Game Boy Tetris. So I would download those ROMs so I could play my classic childhood memory games on my computer, and there was no legal way. There was no legal way. So yes, I was breaking copyright law, and but they did not provide a legal means for somebody to buy and use their stuff. Now, some companies are smarter than others. For example, Sega has actually made some progress at releasing their stuff, like with their Sega Mega Drive collection, where there are many Sega Genesis games that you can buy on Steam, and play some Golden Axe and like this racing game and Streets of Rage, man. The Streets of Rage,
Oh,
so basically,
this
some
is
companies are smart, whereas some other companies are very stingy with their property, and they don't want you to download the ROM, but they also don't allow you a chance to buy it. And I think so. I've become very sad at proprietary software. I don't like proprietary software. It's not because it costs money. That's not the issue. It's more about the fact that if that company goes out of business or they decide to make us, you can't even buy the game anymore. No, you have to do a subscription service like Nintendo Switch Online. It's great, but then you're paying a subscription fee. You don't have a chance to just buy the game and keep it on your device. So you have to pay a yearly subscription fee to be able to access those NES games. And I don't like that. And then Microsoft basically wrecked a lot of things, because now the fact that they've made like Microsoft Word and Microsoft Office Suite be a subscription only service where you have to pay a yearly subscription fee to be able to use Microsoft Word. Well, no wonder people like me are migrating to OpenOffice and LibreOffice and stuff like that, because I feel like that goes too far, because you can't have an author write a book in a proprietary format and then, oh, your Microsoft Word subscription ended. You can no longer open your own book file that you wrote. You can't open your own manuscript like that. Okay, if there's anybody who deserves hell, it's the people who made that decision. I'm willing to say that.
Yes, well said, well said. And it has been a very long time since I have heard reference made to Golden Axe and Streets of Rage. So bravo there for that, Chastity. That's
Hey,
wow.
I'm an
That,
80s baby.
Golden Axe, wowzers. Uh, is there one person in 10,000 watching this besides us who gets that reference? But all right. So continuing with education here, you lately graduated from Full Sail University. I wonder if you could
Mhm.
talk to us, Chastity, about what was the decision that brought you into that line of training, and how has that training, presumably something regarding literature, how has that influenced your writing?
It influenced it a lot because interestingly, I didn't start in the creative writing program. Originally, I started in the game business and esports science program. I had this idea, well, maybe I can get a job in the video game industry. Maybe I can be a tester or reviewer for video games, or maybe I can design the art, because I also do some graphic design. Like, well, this flag behind me, that's a progress flag that I designed in Inkscape with my own custom color scheme there. And I thought maybe I could contribute to making games, because
By
I've
the
loved
way,
playing video games. That's what I started. I joined that program, but then I changed my major. I changed programs because I was really not liking the content, because I guess it was so money focused. And I really got upset at some of the business practices with video games. Like some of what I've already mentioned with the proprietary software and some of the unethical things that companies are doing. And then these games that are these massive online multiplayer games that are pay to win. It's like whoever has the most money gets the best gear and they can just win more. And I started really thinking that, I don't really want to be in a video game industry. I don't really want to work for a video game company because they're going to do business practices that I really don't agree with.
I'm going
And
to
of course,
interject here.
yeah.
Another guest on this series, and he's done some other work for us, is Clint Richardson, who does a lot of work with the legal system and writing on that topic. But Clint was involved with video game companies, and he left just because you're on this very topic. He left. He was working on a series which was quite popular in its day called, I believe it was Final Fantasy.
Oh,
It
everyone
was
knows Final Fantasy.
it was one of the very, very big early 2000s series, and he left because the shooting sound effect when you shot an enemy, it was pigs. It was actually pigs being slaughtered. That was the actual, audio, and he was very disturbed by the fact that this energetically dark, killing of the animals was what millions of children were listening to, not knowing what in fact it was.
Yeah. That's actually very relevant because I'm that kind of person who can't bear to kill the animals in Minecraft, for example. Like I see I'm an ethical vegan. That's another key thing about me is I don't want to kill, these innocent animals who haven't done anything wrong, And I get very sad about the violence in video games. And you'll notice that the video games, the board games I play are those that don't contain real violence in general. Unless you count Super Smash Brothers or something, but that's not real violence, man. That's cute cartoonish violence where
Or something completely abstracted like chess, a
yeah.
complete abstraction of a war.
If you think about it, chess, Tetris, Dr. Mario, poker, solitaire, Balatro, like games that involve inanimate objects instead of even real people or animals, it allows me to have a gameplay experience that does not connect with my feelings of humanity or about even the animals necessarily. Although I gotta say I love Goat Simulator. I need to play some more of that.
Very funny. So you started off at Full Sail, in the video game programming stuff, and then you scooted over to, creative writing, or was there an intermission? You were just up in the air with liberal arts, or how did that develop?
Well, here's what actually happened is I started really growing to hate my assignments that I was doing. See, um, because what I noticed is that now there was a lot of writing involved in many of my assignments. That I would have to write essays, I would have to write reports, all kinds of things. And I would get like 100% grades on the writing portions of my grades. And I'm like, well, that's strange. The writing, yeah, the writing assignments, I'm getting 100% grades on these kinds of things. But then when it's something like, taking a course on Microsoft Excel and using these spreadsheets and manipulating this data of the numbers and the money, I really wasn't into that. It's like I love numbers, but I love, integer sequence. I love messing around with the bits and bytes of video games. I don't like numbers when it's about money. I like it when it's about color codes or red, green, and blue colors of light to make any color. And I started realizing, well, I need to get something involved where I'm writing more since that's what I'm doing. And so when I talk to them about changing, my program to something that was more my interest, they gave me a link to show all the different courses they have on the site, and there were a lot that interested me. Obviously, like there was the computer science type stuff that I liked. There was music stuff, but one thing about the creative writing is that, well, I had been getting good grades on my writing assignments. I had already published quite a few books at that time. And then I started realizing, wait a minute, writing can contribute to so many things. Because when you're a writer, you can do just about anything. Because it doesn't matter whether you're writing a novel, you're writing a story for people to read that gives them entertainment, or whether you're writing the documentation of a piece of software, or even when you buy a chess set and it comes with like a little instruction manual that teaches the rules of chess, somebody wrote that. Like, I even have a poker set that I bought that talks about some of the rules of poker. Doesn't explain it in depth enough, but with everything, every time that you buy anything, it comes with like a warranty, and it comes with an instruction manual. So a microwave, somebody wrote the instructions on how to operate a microwave, and then I started. I was stocking at Walmart too at the time, and I'm like, wait a minute. The nutrition facts, the list of ingredients, the advertising slogans on every can of vegetables, every box of cereal. And I started realizing, if someone is a writer, then there is not a single product that Walmart sells that writing doesn't touch. And one time when I told a coworker that I had changed my degree to creative writing, she says, "What are you going to do with creative writing? How are you going to get a job with creative writing?" And you know what? I laughed at her because, yeah, first of all, yes, it is hard to make money as a writer. That's true. But I also, at the time, was just thinking writing is involved in so many things. It doesn't matter whether I'm writing a C program to generate an animation, or whether I'm writing a description for a YouTube video. Like I'm writing all the time. I'm typing things all the time, and I got very nerdy. I When I changed to creative writing, I got super nerdy, and I started looking for alternatives because they were teaching, using Microsoft Word, because that's still what an industry standard thing that people use. But I started looking for all kinds of alternatives. I started looking for other ways to format things, and that's how I started discovering, things like Markdown and HTML and restructured text, and learning about all these different formats. Learning all the different file formats there are for ebooks and documentation. And I was just amazed because literally I consider myself a writer, but it's not just writing English. Like I do computer programming. Like I'll write in some C, some JavaScript, some bash scripting, some markdown, and it all connects. Because when I am writing in markdown, like my chess book, for example, my chess book, Chastity's Chess Chapters, that was a project combining graphic design with writing and my knowledge of playing chess, because that book contains a lot of pictures, and I basically I took like these free open source licensed images for chess pieces, and then I designed the ideal chessboard, and then I set up like a grid so that I could then move the pieces where I want. They would snap within that square. And that took a while to figure out, but once I did it, I was then able to create any chessboard position. Starting with this one file, I could just set up any chessboard position with the pieces on any squares of the board. So then I have my chess book is full of that. And I designed the pictures, but then I'm writing markdown to embed the images. So when you do that, you're literally typing the alternate text of it, like what it will show if the image doesn't load. And you're doing a link to the image. And that link could be locally on your device, like in an actual folder on your computer, or it can be a URL hosted on some website. So what I actually did is I just uploaded all of my images that are used in the chess book. They're on ChastityWhiteRose.com. They're in my media section of my dashboard on my WordPress site. Every single chess position file on there. And so literally the markdown file that's the source of my book, I'm literally embedding from the internet those images hosted on my blog. And then I use the open source program Pandoc to convert that into a PDF or into an EPUB file. So then it downloads those images from the internet and then embeds it in the file. So the interesting aspect of that is that then when somebody buys the ebook, for example, they can download it to their device, and then even if they don't have an internet connection at the time, the files are already embedded in the ebook file. Or if they buy the paperback book off of Amazon, it's literally all printed in paper and ink. So, and also the printing cost of that is kind of high. Yeah, the paperback, it's a bit expensive because we're talking full-size chessboard images of positions and a lot of them. So it was probably the highest printing cost of paperback book that I've ever produced, but it's beautiful. So.
And the audience, once again, will be able to access that through the link tree, the Amazon website, to get Chastity's books. And speaking
Yeah.
of projects and books, Chastity, can you tell us about the project, The Story of Chad, which is what I initially, way back when, contacted you about, The Story of Chad?
Yes, The Story of Chad is a novel that I started while I was beginning my creative writing program. For literary techniques and storytelling, I had to create a character. And I didn't want to just create a character that was lame. I don't do anything half-assed, you know. If I'm going to make a character, I need to make a character that is so awesome that I will want to reuse that same character in multiple stories. So I started analyzing, well, if I'm going to make a character, what or who am I going to base it on? So Chad became an alternate version of myself, that's different. Now this Chad, he plays soccer. He's a cisgender straight male, and he plays soccer and he drives a car. I don't drive a car, but he does. He has a nice car, and all of the things that I don't do, Chad is like the alter ego. He's almost like my evil twin in a sense, except he's not evil. He's actually very good. And so he's this guy who he's popular, but there's only one similarity that Chad and I have, is that, see, Chad is very humble. Chad, he may be rich, and he may be the popular soccer star of the town, but he spends his time, you know, helping the children, the elderly, the animals, the animal shelter. He literally embodies, you know, what Jesus taught, that whoever wants to be the greatest among you must be the servant of all. So he's got a servant's heart. So he's this guy that he could be an arrogant, self-righteous, stuck-up guy, but instead he remains humble. He remains a servant. And then I think part of the story is And I mean, this might be a little bit of a spoiler, but part of the point of the story is that it's not actually the fact that he plays sports or that he's rich that the townspeople love Chad. It's about who he is at heart. That's what it's about. And I think that discovery that even if you are rich or even if you can always win at a certain sport, it's about who you are on the inside. Do you have love for your fellow creatures? Um, that is the message that I'm hoping that it gets across in my novel, which I'm up to 7 chapters so far. Because I had abandoned it for a long time. I had like 3, 4 chapters. But then after I got your invite, I recently was inspired to start writing a little bit more in it again. And so I think with this project, I mean, I don't want to rush it because I already abandoned it and forgot about it for so long. But I'm thinking this is one of those kinds of stories I want to really craft it. I want it to really flow. I want it to make logical sense from one chapter to the next, what's happening. And this would be, I guess you could say this book, when it's complete, would be my first fiction novel. Because a lot of the stuff that I've written so far has been mostly, it's been nonfiction. It'll be my opinions about religion and politics. And then there's the Chandler's Honesty series, which is, it blurs the lines between truth and fiction, because that's a series of conversations I have with a unicorn named Honesty. So that's kind of a little series I have. And but I guess this story of Chad, because this universe where the book is there, it takes place in a town called Podunk, and Podunk literally means like a town that's in the middle of nowhere. It's like a town that you would not have heard of. And it all started because my friend Poffo referred to the town of Lee's where I live as like a podunk town, because in a way it sort of is, because if you don't live in Lee Summit, Missouri, you're not going to hear about Lee Summit, Missouri very often. It's not like New York or Los Angeles or Miami. It's not one of the well-known cities. It's a small suburb of the Kansas City area. And it's a big deal to me because I've lived here since I was 9 years old, basically. But it's still kind of a town that you would not have heard of much in the other parts of the world. And so, interestingly, for one of my classes, I had to develop, it was called Developing New Worlds. And so I had to come up with like a geographical location of where my fictional world would be. And, I had to research things about it. And it was a very interesting research project, because what ended up happening is that, at least for that purpose of that class, this may not make it into the actual novel, but for the purpose of that class, I had actually placed the town of Podunk in a place near St. Louis. And part of the reason for that is there was this one part of one of the chapters where it mentions the Podunk, I think it's the Podunk Stallions against the Applewood Dragons. Now, there is a small suburb of St. Louis called Applewood, interestingly, which sort of checks out, because if you think about it, a place probably had a lot of apple trees, and it probably became known as Applewood because that's where it came from, So there's probably a lot of places with that name. So I was deliberately choosing things like Podunk, Applewood, that are so common. And that was strategic. The idea that it's such a common name that you would find that it would not necessarily have to be a specific place. Because if I was to write literally about, actual St. Louis or literally about Kansas City, First of all, that would require a lot more research. It would also require getting things more accurate, because a story, ironically, a fiction story, it needs to be believable. It needs to actually be believable in the sense that it must fit with the time. Like Back to the Future, when they made Back to the Future, the movies, well, there's time travel. So they had to have the actors look and act and talk and dress as people from that time period. So whether they're in the Old West in the third movie, or whether for the first movie they're like in 1955, they have to have the music and the way people dress and talk, the way everything is. They have to act like it's that year and the way people were. So when you do fiction, it's based on reality. There's no true fiction, because everything is based on something real that happened. And even the character of Chad is based off of parts of me that had never been able to be expressed. And there's other, like there's Pastor Mark in the story, who is a little bit like a certain pastor that I knew. And then Chad has three friends, Matthew, Luke, and John. And I'm sure you can start to sort of get where those names come, because you have this. So basically there is a Matthew, a Mark, a Luke, and a John, and then there's a Chad. So you're taking the four gospels from the Bible names, which were named after men back then, but then you have Chad, which is a modern adventure. So you have it, because the story is obviously going to take place in modern times, but it's going to be sort of like it's like a small town. It's almost like this town of Podunk, it only has a population of about 200 people in this town, in the fictional universe I created. And when I picture this town, here's how I picture it. I picture it like the Gospel Bill series. Like, you have Bill Gunther, the sheriff, and you have Elmer Barnes, you have Nicodemus, like, because that was a show that I used to watch a long time ago, and I thought this old west town. And then you have Miss Lena, who runs the general store, and then there's the guy who runs the barbershop. Like, when I picture a small town, I picture like it's a small area. Like, you have all these little towns. It's almost like the old west, but it's not quite that old. It's a modern setting. People drive cars and stuff, but the town is small, has a small population. So you better believe that if one thing happens in the town, all 200 people in that town, besides that person, also know about it. So there's no privacy. This is a small town where your family knows, and your neighbor knows. So so news spreads very quickly. And then there's Gabby, who runs the paper. They have a newspaper that everybody reads, the Podunk Times, and like so all these details, some of which have not even been written yet into the actual novel, but that I came up with for other classes when I had to develop new worlds. I had to develop, and I even had this one part where I've toyed with the idea of including this Native American man named Niutachi. And there was actually a certain tribe that at one point had that name that was in Missouri. So Podunk, it takes place in the state of Missouri. So there's some types of things that are relevant, but basically I've come with characters. I've come up with characters. So we have Chad's best friend Matthew, but we also have Stacy, the girl who also works at the animal shelter, and we have all these different people. I've come up with all these bizarre people, and I'm like, where did I come up with all this? And yet, you better believe that every single one of these characters, there's somebody in my life that I met at one person that character was based on. And so, like, I'm hoping that if this book becomes a reality and people read it, that they will be able to figure out the people who know me will be able to figure out which character was based on them. That's part of the fun of it. Because when you write a book, and especially if you're writing a book about real events, but you change the names of people, because my mom did that when she wrote her book. She did not use the real names of people, because if you use the real names of people, well, those people may not like that, because they may view that as a violation of their privacy. And those who have done things that they should not be doing, we should say, they don't like being revealed, in that. So it's almost like, if you don't have anything good to say about a person, then you better change their name so they don't sue you for writing about them in your book. That's what that's about.
Yes, it doesn't take too much to throw the attorneys off. I've done as much myself, so that's very very prudent to do altogether. Especially if you have fun with the names that you give. You give maybe people you're not on the best of terms with. You can have your revenge in the false name as well.
Well, and also
Uh,
the name, and
yes.
one more thing about the name, because before we started recording, I was explaining a little bit about the name Chad. Besides the fact that Chad means like the man, the masculine dude, bro, that is the king. Chad also is very similar to Chandler and Chastity. Chandler being my legal given name at birth, and Chastity being my preferred name. So if you think about it, the same person who wrote Chastity's chess chapters is now writing a story about Chad. That there's a CH theme, and then there's the game, yeah, because there's chess, like everything is a CH theme. So you can kind of see it's almost like a trademark. There's going to be a lot of CH words in what I do.
Excellent. There, some assonance and some of those poetic devices are always good to dust off there. My final question for this interview, I should hope to lasso you for another one down the line there, Chastity. But for today, before we let you get off to a well-earned time of sleep, what does a writing day look like for you? And also, what does the process of writing a story look like for you? Do you just go for the throat right off the bat? Do you build up to it? How does a day look for you as an author and as a project?
Well, you want to know something? Here's kind of what happens is inspiration hits me at the weirdest times. I don't know what it is, but like I might be out grocery shopping, or I might be working at Walmart. And then the next time I think I'll have an idea, and I'll be typing notes on my phone or whatever that I'll later edit on the computer. These wild ideas just strike me. These inspirational moments, but then sometimes there'll be a topic that's on my mind a lot lately. Because, for example, there was this friend, there was this a girl who worked at Walmart, who spoke Spanish. She was an immigrant, and when her visa expired and she couldn't work at Walmart anymore, I was so sad. Like I cried about it, because we got along so well, and we used Google Translate a lot, but she knew more English than I knew Spanish. And so what ended up happening is having this immigrant friend like this had really got me to a point where I was upset when I would get on Facebook to post my chess videos or something, and then people are talking about all these immigrants, all these illegal immigrants and stuff, and it really made me cry, because this idea that people, they're treating somebody as less than themselves just because they were not born in this country, And I don't I don't think that you have to have a particular view on what immigration law should be, or is, or should be. That's not the point. The point is that, my friend is a person just like me, and I just don't believe that there should be these separate classes of people, where well, you were born in this country, therefore you have these rights that you did not earn. You don't earn being born in a country. So the idea that you are able to work in your country, you don't have to go through a whole immigration process when you're born. I'm just a birthright citizen of the United States of America, but I can't take credit for that. And to me, when my friend who, I don't know the specific details, but I know that there are problems in Guatemala. I know there's earthquakes. There are people who are homeless. There's been earthquakes. There's devastation, starvation, that kind of thing. So when somebody doesn't have a home in their country, and so they come to the U.S. looking for an opportunity, there's nothing wrong with that. You know what I mean? And I just personally believe that my friend, who I did write about her on my blog, as part of this project called Walking the Rainbow Bridge. Um, and the name I used for her was Fiesta, because what would happen is we'd be listening to music, and because the Walmart radio is always playing popular songs, and then she would start dancing, and I just said fiesta and started dancing with her, because fiesta is the word for party in Spanish, and even I knew that much. So I referred to her as my friend Fiesta, because we're, and I think I actually wrote in there that, every day I worked with her was a party. And that's how I feel about her. So I hope she's well wherever she is now. But that was kind of a heartbreaking moment when you develop a friendship with this person that you worked with for like 3-4 months at Walmart, and you see him every night. You have lunch together, and you try to communicate with a little Spanish and English, and and I remember that one time I said, "Mi español es no bueno," which means my Spanish is no good. And I didn't even use Google Translate to figure that one out. I was just making stuff up, and I accidentally said it right. Yeah,
That's
but
great. Well, yes.
but because you asked about the inspiration, and so what ended up
Yes,
happening
thank
is
you.
I ended up writing a couple of chapters in Walking the Rainbow Bridge. One was about, immigration and citizenship, and the other was about nationalism. It was about this nationalism and patriotism, and so it turned into sort of like essays, because I was um I was grieving about the loss of this friend that I was no longer going to see at Walmart, but then it ended up being inspiration for my writing. So when I have an emotional event, that usually triggers something. And the one thing that I must say, see, we named the title of this, The Vow of Chastity, Creative Writing with Chastity White Rose. And The Vow of Chastity was the title of a book that I did. Now, not very many people have read it, like most of my stuff, but The Vow of Chastity it started out first, it's a vow that I made to myself. It was a vow that I would never have sex, which is interesting because nobody does that. Like, how many people do that? And unless you are like, a Buddhist monk, or you're like a Catholic nun or priest or something. Usually it's part of like a religious order. It's part of their religion. But with me, it wasn't necessarily like that. It is kind of a spiritual thing. But for me, I basically wrote probably like 12, 13 chapters in the book, The Vow of Chastity, explaining why I was vowing celibacy for life. And I named it The Vow of Chastity. And that's actually where my name Chastity comes from. Because a nun will take, or a priest in Catholicism will take a vow of chastity. So they're vowing to live a celibate life. And that's what I did, except I think it matters more because nobody told me that I had to do this. Nobody told me that I had to do this. I just feel like I'm called to this. But It also avoids a lot of complication. It avoids a lot of complication because people, they become attached to people when they're in romantic and sexual relationships. They get very attached to people. And sometimes people, they have these heartbreaking situations where they commit suicide after their boyfriend or girlfriend breaks up with them, or if their spouse divorces them. Like, it leads to some serious depression and suicide. And there's these huge fights, court battles over custody of the children and who gets the house and all this stuff. And I look at the state of modern marriages and modern relationships, and I see, the lack of commitment. And I think that's part of, I guess you could say, there's some, but just like, to make a comparison to doing college, there's people who they go to college because their family told them, oh, you have to go to college. If you were going to kick you out of the house if you don't go to college or whatever. So they go to college, but because they're only doing it because their parents want them to go to college, instead of because they really feel like that's something they want, it doesn't mean anything. So then that kid, who goes to college, they go out drinking and partying. They don't really study. They don't get good grades because they're not even trying to get an education. They don't appreciate it. And I feel like that's the way people go into marriages. They go in without a sense of commitment. They're like, oh, well, I like this person now, but I'm just going to divorce them or break up with them as soon as I don't like the way they smell or something. Like, so there's no commitment. And I think the thing with me is that I'm not against the concept of marriage, or a relationship that's long term, like a life partner. I'm not even against that idea necessarily, but I feel like too often it's based on people's sexuality. It's based off of, they're being sexually attracted to people. It's based off of certain things that aren't right. Like even the way marriage laws come with all these different benefits, like tax benefits and all these different rights, of all these things. It's like, are people getting married for financial reasons, or is it because they love each other? Are they getting married because they really love this person and they really want to be with them, till in sickness and in health, till death do us part? Do they really want that? Or are they only getting married because if they don't get married, then their church tells them that they're living in sin if they're having sex outside of marriage? You know what I mean? So are people, when they're going into a relationship or a marriage, are they doing it for the right reason, or are they doing it for all the wrong reasons just because people tell them they have to? And I feel like the things that I do are very self-motivated, because nobody told me that I had to vow chastity or write a book about it. No, nobody told me that I had to write the story of Chad, or become a chess player. Nobody told me to gender transition. Nobody told me to do any of these things. And I think that goes all back to the fact that I was being homeschooled. I wasn't indoctrinated in the same way as a public school child may have been. I was able to just freely think more myself. And when I came to this conclusion on my own, I'm glad that I came to things the way I did, because I saw something a couple years ago on Facebook that people are trying to say that the reason so many kids are identifying as transgender these days is because it's a fad. It's the internet. It's a fad. And I'm like, how come I was that way before I even had access to the internet? Before I had seen a single movie or TV show that had a gay character, even, you know, I didn't have any of that. Everything was very, I mean, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and I didn't have access to the internet until I was 14 years old, and then I started using it to learn computer programming and stuff. But it now, I mean, obviously now, in 2025, certain things can become a fad. I think things can go too far. They can become a fad, and it's like, well, now there's like a flag for every identity under the sun, you know? And so now it's like people have gotten so lost in having an identity that they'll make one up, you know? And if you're going to do that, you might as well just make up a character and write a novel about it.
Well, that's a great place to bring down the bird here, Chastity. And thank you for this very insightful discussion. We covered so much territory, and I should indeed hope to have you back on down the line, perhaps when the Chad project is tied up, or who knows what else you'll have coming out and of ahead as you get inspired there with different beautiful people you come across and coworkers and so forth. So, to the audience, please do your due diligence. Check out Chastity's link tree as well as some of the various other sites. Only then are you allowed to go over to Lick Chess, which is going to also be down below. You can have some fun after you buy Chastity's books and read them all. And then you can head over to Apocatastasis and maybe enroll in one of our literature classes. So, to the audience, thank you for your attention. And Chastity White Rose, thank you especially for sitting down here and having a chit chat.
Yeah, it was time well spent. Thank you so much for the invite.